I don't just talk about other people's stuff, I also make my own. Books in particular. To date, I have 4 books you can check out on Amazon. Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and the short story collection Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Hop on down to the description for Amazon links to all 4 books. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Omni viewer, and I'm back for more Primal reviews, this time for the Season 2 episode Red Mist, which is the most intense Season 2 has gotten so far. But then again, knowing Primal, I'm sure it can always get even more intense. So we'll see what happens, but anyway, we gotta focus on this particular episode, which starts off brutally and with vicious action, and just doesn't let up for its entire first half, and even a little bit into the second half. It's actually interesting. The Season 2 episodes we've seen so far have established a bit of a pattern where they start off calm. There's not necessarily no action at all, but it's lighter on action. It's more focused on developing atmosphere and letting the characters have some meaningful interactions. But then the second half comes along, and that's when the action picks up. Red Mist inverts that. It kind of had to, because the previous episode ended with the promise that there was going to be a huge battle, and it delivers right off the bat. It starts with the action, and then the second half of the episode is sort of the calm after the storm, where things get very interesting, but we'll get to that in a moment. First half of the episode, we gotta go through this in order. This is the priority. First half of the episode is different from every other action scene we've witnessed up to this point, because this is Spear and Fang facing off against a whole army of Vikings, and this is not the same as a pack of predatory creatures. These guys are intelligent. They're clearly more advanced in terms of technology, in terms of mentality, in terms of just about everything, more advanced than Spear and Fang, and yet Spear and Fang still put up one heck of a fight. Like, it seems implied, at least, that the Vikings might not necessarily have had to deal with anything like this before, and why would they? They're clearly the top dogs in this particular region. We know there are dinosaurs in this land, but there clearly aren't that many. They are able to sail off and pick up their slaves from wherever they get them from. The Vikings are the apex in this land. They clearly have nothing to fear. So Spear and Fang come along, and you'd think Spear and Fang just wouldn't be able to stand much of a chance. I mean, after all, the Vikings probably look at this and think, well, here's a nearly naked Neanderthal and a big lizard. We got this. We're more organized. We've spent our entire lives living and training just for combat and violence, and we outnumber them like by the dozens at least. We can take them down. And yet, Spear and Fang once again demonstrate that when they are backed into a corner, that just makes them even more dangerous than they already are. And they are very dangerous just under normal circumstances. I mean, it is crazy what they go through. And once again, we see this interesting dynamic between the two where, even though they're basically in the same circumstances, they do have very different viewpoints. We always have to bear in mind that Spear and Fang are, even though they are in sync, they do not have the same mentality. One is a human and one is an animal. A very intelligent animal, of course, but still ultimately an animal. So when Fang is confronted with enemies, Fang just sees enemy, need to kill in order to survive. And she does it without really thinking about who that person is. But there are moments in the fight where Spear does contemplate the nature of his enemies. When he's surrounded by the other Viking villagers, the ones who weren't coming back from a hunt but were already there in their huts and tents and everything, he takes a moment to look around and he sees that there are women among the crowd, some of which have like babies strapped to their bodies, and some of them are very young, some of the people surrounding him are children. And he just takes this moment to sort of realize, I wasn't expecting all of this. But he doesn't really have time to think about the moral implications of what it will mean to fight them, because the intention is clear. Regardless of who or what these people are, they all want to kill him all the same. So he's not going to sit back and think, gee, maybe I should be careful. No. If they're going to kill him, he's going to do everything he can to fight back, even if that means having to kill them. But there are some instances where he pulls his punches. There's the one little boy Viking who, again, just like the others, has every intention of killing Spear, but you get the impression that if he had more control over the situation, Spear would not necessarily kill him. When the little boy charges directly into the fray, Spear has been leading with the blade the whole time, but when the boy charges him, he just backhands him out of the fight. Clearly he does not have any intention of killing a child. Not deliberately, certainly. And if the circumstances were a little bit different, I'm pretty sure we would have seen a scenario where Spear would have just kept knocking the kid out of the fight and hopefully just eventually get to a point where he's staring the kid down and saying, "Don't get back up," for all intents and purposes. Obviously he wouldn't literally say that, but he basically keep knocking him out of the fight until the kid got the point. Not the point of the blade. Do I even need to specify that? Probably. But then, of course, tragedy strikes, in a sense, when the kid starts really letting Spear have it, and Spear, he does what he has to do to get the kid off of him, and killing the kid, which does happen, the show actually went there, it's an accident. Spear did not intend to do it. We established that already. He did not intend to kill this child. And yet, when he does it, again, there's this brief moment where he has this "what have I done" look on his face. But again, he doesn't really have time to get all introspective and think about the nature of this brutal world in which he lives, because everyone else is still trying to kill him, so he just has to keep fighting. It's that just him basically deciding, law of the jungle still applies here. Kill or be killed, that's what I have to do. So, again, we see how this is a contrast between Spear and Fang. And what's really crazy is that it also establishes that Spear and Fang are not easy to take down, even when the odds are completely stacked against them. Like, we've seen them in circumstances where the odds do not favor their victory, and it's always a struggle for them to really break out of those circumstances and survive. Here, though, you get the impression that by all rights, they should have been killed. The Vikings should have gotten them. Towards the end of the first half, they are getting filled with arrows from all directions. And all that does is make them even angrier and even more determined, and that's when the eponymous red mist comes in. Where did that red mist come from? Who knows, and ultimately who cares? We have seen far stranger things in this world than a weather phenomenon that just happens to have a particularly odd color to it. Whatever that thing is, though, that is what helps them get the advantage, surprisingly enough. Like, once they are at a point, that actually leads to one of the eerier sequences in the whole series, in fact, where the mist is covering the whole village and everything is reduced to silhouettes. There isn't even any music for this. It's just the sound of Spear and Fang moving through the village, and their shadows burst out, they kill their targets, and then they vanish just as quickly. Very effective horror sequence right there. And it's not until the second half where we finally get a chance to catch our breath that things really hit home. In the second half, new characters appear. They do not have names, according to the credits. It's just a Viking chieftain and a woman I'm pretty sure is meant to be his sister, because they look kind of similar. They have the same colored hair. They're clearly not romantically involved because the chieftain's wife and son were among the people slaughtered in the village. So I'm guessing brother and sister, cousins. Maybe they're not related at all, but they're like the alpha male and female appointed by the Vikings to oversee everything. But whatever. They're coming back with some new slaves on their Viking ship, and they arrive a little bit after Spear and Fang have left. We get some indication that Spear, Fang, and Mira all basically, once they were done, took a boat and left. Actually, before I get too far, gotta mention Mira. I almost forgot. Mira organizes the escape for the slaves. And it almost looked like she was going to run with them, but apparently she didn't. But her priority is getting the rest of them out. Seeing that there is an opportunity for them to be free, she does not waste it. But at the same time, she finds herself in a position where she winds up having to take up a weapon. And that again creates an interesting contrast between her and her two rescuers. Because she is forced to use these weapons. She is forced to kill in order to survive. But her response is very different. She does not like this. We don't know that much about her upbringing at this point. We don't know what kind of culture exactly she comes from. But, we see her reaction plainly. She kills a bear and a Viking, and she throws down the weapon once she's done, and we never see her engage in battle again after that. She wants nothing to do with this. That's probably gonna lead to some form of interpersonal conflict between her and Spear at some point. But either way, I've said my piece on that now. Gotta get to these new Viking characters. They arrive just in time to witness the aftermath. And what they find is horrifying. This is one of the few times where we see the aftermath of a vicious attack, and it's Spear and Fang who perpetrated it. And it kind of leads to an interesting thing with how we view these characters, because on the one hand, we're clearly meant to see some level of sympathy for them. We're not just supposed to see these Vikings as just big, bad, evil Vikings. Because the chieftain, you kind of know in the back of your mind that the really stern-looking woman and the boy she was taking care of, both of whom wind up getting killed by Spear and Fang respectively, you kind of know as soon as you see the chieftain that those two are probably going to have some sort of personal connection to this guy. But just knowing it doesn't lessen the effect of seeing his grief when he finds them and he realizes that everything he loved is gone. It's actually basically what Spear encountered in the first episode of the whole series. Spear was just in time to see his family get slaughtered by dinosaurs. Here the chieftain arrives and finds that his family has already been slaughtered. He doesn't necessarily know by whom or what, but he can put together that whoever it was took a boat and left. And it's a very eerie parallel, but in terms of sheer numbers, this Viking chieftain has actually lost more than Spear and Fang, because he was looking after an entire tribe. And while he was off getting more resources, more on those resources in a moment, they were all killed. He wasn't able to protect them. Would he have actually been able to? Who knows? But it's an odd parallel. We now have a new antagonist who went through something very similar to what our protagonists went through, so we can kind of understand where he's coming from and why he is suiting up at the end to go off and avenge them. But then again, on the other hand, what was this guy off doing? Getting more slaves. I mean, I don't exactly think it's a shocking statement to make that slavery is a bad thing, but this is, yeah, it's part of the Viking culture, clearly, but they're still enslaving people. And yes, they let the 4 slaves that they had just procured free before sailing off to get revenge, but that's not because they suddenly felt altruistic. It's not like they looked at all the slaughter and completely reassessed their way of thinking and decided slavery was bad. No, they let the slaves go because there's no need for them anymore. There's no longer a village for them to be enslaved in, so what's the point of keeping them around? Hollow gesture. That's not enough to make me think that these are going to be secret good guys, per se. There is still potential for them to not become true full-on villains, depending on where the series goes from here. They might still have arcs. I mean, they were introduced in a sympathetic light, even if they are going after our protagonists. They're sort of in this weird, nebulous realm where I understand them, and I do feel some level of sympathy for them, but I'm not on their side. They are still technically not good people. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where they go. Plus, of course, we have to consider the fact that they're going out for revenge specifically. And I'm going to try making a much longer video about this at some point, but here's the thing about revenge in Primal. It has been established more than once that getting revenge is pointless. The rule of Primal seems to be that you are allowed to kill for the means of survival. The ultimate goal in this world is to survive by any means, and if those means require you to take someone else's life, that's just the way it has to be in this world. So basically, if you kill a creature because you intend to eat it, that is considered acceptable. If you kill a creature because it wants to eat you, that is acceptable. It's not necessarily good, but it's not necessarily bad. It's just the way it is. But when it comes to revenge, that is not killing for survival. That is killing for personal reasons. Think back to the first episode. Spear wants to get revenge on his family's killers. In fact, when he first sees Fang, he has every intention of killing her. Not because he thinks he's one of the dinosaurs that killed his family, but because he just hates all dinosaurs at that point, and he wants to kill for his own satisfaction. Now, at the end of that episode, Spear and Fang do wind up killing those giant red-horned carnosaurs and technically avenge their families. That's more of a side bonus because they are ultimately fighting to survive, but getting that extra bit of vengeance doesn't result in anything. Once the dust has settled, they still are left with the fact that their families are still gone. They're still alone at that point. Killing their family's killers has not brought anything back. It hasn't changed a thing. The happy ending at the end of that first episode only comes when Spear and Fang decide that they are going to form a new family unit and survive together. And of course, then we have the Ape Men episode where those guerrilla warrior... Then, of course, we have the Ape Man episode where the guerrilla warrior has just about killed Fang in the tournament. Spear manages to escape and get some of that weird black goo into his system that turns him into Venom Hulk. And he starts going on a rampage, and he just kills indiscriminately even when the rest of that ape man tribe is clearly on the retreat and just wants to get away, he keeps killing them because he wants revenge in that moment. But the episode ends with him surrounded by all these dead creatures that he has killed because he was enraged at them. But Fang is still on death's door. And of course there was that cliffhanger that left us hanging for so long. But thankfully we know by now Spear and Fang survived, both of them. But anyway, even just those two examples clearly show us that revenge is not necessarily a good thing in this world. And our two Vikings are going specifically to get revenge. So, once again, their motives are understandable, but not necessarily ones we should be rooting for based on the rules of this world. So it's curious. I'm interested to see where they go with these two. I'm not sure where they'll be going, but, well, we'll get to that in a moment. Normally, Primal episodes end with a very brief preview of what the next episode is going to be. The next episode of this particular season is entitled The Primal Theory, and the little bit of a synopsis that's been posted around states that it's going to involve some massive world building about the history and origins of this particular world. And that means there was no preview. All there was text from Adult Swim, you know, that cheeky text that they sometimes use for the bumpers, saying that Genndy Tartakovsky specifically told them, don't show any footage from this episode. And they're saying, well, we can't, it's the law. There are some sound effects at the end which make it sound like it's going to be even more intense and brutal than this episode, Red Mist. But man, I mean, think about the implications. The stuff we're going to see in this episode is so significant that they literally cannot even show so much as a split second of it without spoiling something major. What is waiting for us in this next episode? My word, it's gotta be something huge. I don't know what it's gonna be. I'm guessing we're probably gonna get some information about that giant devil Sauron figure we saw in the trailer, but I mean, yikes. I don't know what it is, and I don't know if I'm ready for it, but it's coming either way. But that's... Anyway, that's all for next week, I guess. For this week, Red Mist once again delivered, but it also really brought things forward and introduced even more new elements that fit in so well with everything, and also are going to make things very different moving forward. Season 2 is more focused on telling an overarching story than Season 1 was, because Season 1 was very episodic. Season 2 has never really given us a moment to think that we can have a breather between episodes, because the plot just keeps going. And where is it going? That is the question. That is what's got us all on the edge of our seats, I'm sure. So, well, I suggest we all brace ourselves, because if the next episode is anything like what Primal has done to us in the past, then it's going to leave us devastated. So, steel yourselves. That is my advice. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.
Congratulations, you reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, you might want to consider supporting us on Patreon. Of course, the other way to support us is to go to Amazon and check out our books: Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, Emerald of Maddox City, and Assorted Absurdities, Tales of Kaiju Punk and Other Genres. Also check the description for links to DeviantArt and other platforms we operate. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.